This, as you know, that Hamas has released all 20 live hostages today in two batches of 7 and 13. Israel is to, of course, facilitate the return of a lot of the prisoners as well in exchange for the hostages. Right now, all alive hostages are back in Israel. They were first handed over to the Red Cross and then the IDF. There were hundreds gathered in Tel Aviv's hostage square, waiting for the return of their loved ones and their family. We're now, of course, waiting for Donald Trump's Knesset address. Trump arrived in Tel Aviv to mark the return of Israeli hostages by Hamas after more than 2 years in captivity. He is due to speak in the Knesset. And he did tell the reporters, in fact, while heading to the Knesset as well, that Hamas will disarm. All right. Joining us on the broadcast right now is Fleur Hassan Nahum, Israel's Special Envoy for Trade and Innovation, former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Of course, it is a big day. All living hostages are back on Israeli soil. We saw the scenes coming out of Tel Aviv's hostages square. Of course, we know US President Donald Trump is in Israel right now as well and expected to address the Knesset in a short while from now. What can we expect?
Well, I think that what we're seeing today are historic scenes. Not only did we not imagine that all of the living hostages would be able to come home in one piece, because we know that Hamas, as a jihadi terrorist group, wanted to keep their last bit of leverage over Israel. So he managed to do that. So did Netanyahu. But today we're hearing that President Trump has invited Prime Minister Netanyahu to go to Sharm el-Sheikh, to go to this peace conference, bringing all the regional partners and other European partners as well. And maybe this is the beginning of a new era. There's also rumors that the Indonesian president has spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu, that the Sunni moderate Arab countries that we hope will be part of the day after in Gaza are fully engaged. So we could be seeing here the beginning of something that in Israel we've yearned for since our establishment, our re-establishment of the Jewish state in 1948.
Right, absolutely. That is the other big development, that the Israeli Prime Minister has accepted the invitation of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to attend that international peace summit that we're expecting later in the day as well. All eyes will be on that. I want to ask, do you think all the partners come together and do you think they can actually sort out the issues that still remain unanswered, the uncertainties that still persist despite this 20-point peace plan and despite all the hostages being back on Israeli soil?
Well, the thing that's brilliant about this 20-point plan, which is inverse to other plans that were offered before, is that the cards, we hold the cards. We will only retreat to a certain point if the disarmament occurs, which means we still keep our perimeter, a kind of deep perimeter, as long as they don't disarm. So the incentives are for Hamas to disarm and not for Israel to try and bend backwards for this terrorist group. And that's why the tables have turned in that sense. I'm not sure. You know, we're dealing with a very toxic jihadi ideology. But I think what President Trump and Netanyahu have managed to do is to corner the jihadists by turning their own friends and supporters as the main point of pressure on them. Qatar and Turkey are the main supporters of Hamas, and they are the ones that are being used and leveraged by Donald Trump in order to get what we need to have quiet and perhaps maybe even peace.
Now, right, we have spoken about Qatar as well, and we heard what Donald Trump had to say about Qatari involvement in this and mediation in this as well. If the disarmament occurs, and that really is the major point here, if that does happen, do you think this 20-point peace plan, it is somehow, in some ways perhaps, not address some of the issues of legitimacy and perhaps enforceability? Because when we talk about guarantees, could it be that once again we could come back to square one and when it comes to the second round of negotiations? Or do you think that can be dealt with?
I think that even if it does, Their main leverage were the hostages. As long as the hostages were there, Israel was limited in what we could do. Now they're not there. That's the first thing. Except for the ones that
Miss
need a
Naum, I'm
decent
so sorry to
burial.
interject. I'm so sorry to interject, but just to let our viewers know that these are the live visuals that we're getting right now. If we could just have them on, and these are the live visuals, as you can see, hundreds and hundreds who've gathered here, all sorts of emotions right now. Miss Naum, let me just come back to you. I just had to go across to these live visuals that we're getting right now. It is a big day indeed, as you mentioned, a historic day. Sorry, Miss Naum, please continue.
Well, the live visuals that you're showing, in fact, are the terrorists being released, which was my next point. We've had to release 200 terrorists with blood on their hands who've killed many, many hundreds of people in order to get, that's the price that Israel has paid and is always willing to pay to get to the hope of peace. I have a friend who was stabbed 18 times and her friend was killed in front of her eyes, and her stabber is being released right now. The killer of her friend is being released right now. So let's not forget the price that Israel has had to pay to get to this point.
Right, these are the live visuals from Ramallah. You're right to say that as well. And now that being said, when we talk about the issues that remain, you've mentioned that this release comes for many. This is not a jubilant moment, as we're seeing on the other side of the border in Tel Aviv. We've seen how people have been packed in the hostages square. They are, of course, relieved after 2 years of captivity, all of those hostages that have now been released. That being said, when we speak about the war being over, would you say the war is really over, or do you think that there's still a long, long way to go?
Well, let me tell you essentially when the war will be over, when the Palestinian leadership and their enablers and funders actually understand that Israel is not going away. They've been lying to their people for almost 80 years and telling them this. One day, we're going to kick out the Jews from the region. We're going to dismantle the state of Israel, and we're going to get the whole thing, and we're going to kill every last Jew. This is the rhetoric in schools. This is the rhetoric in the media, and this is the rhetoric of the politicians. And it's not, they've never, ever been invested in getting a state, because if they would have been, they would have a state by now. Their main investment has been in the destruction of the state of Israel. So we will only have real peace once the Palestinian leadership understand that Israel is not going anywhere. And therefore, the only way to move forward is to accept we're here and then build something next to us. If they can't do that, we will not have peace.
All right. Now, some would argue that, of course, addressing the question of a two-state solution and statehood is the path to peace, something that was also left out of the 20-point peace plan. Do you think that will come up in the discussions today in Egypt? And do you think that is something that all partners and sides can deal with?
Well, I don't, like I said, Hamas have said they don't want a two-state solution. So it really depends who the partners are. Israel has tried 5 times to have a two-state solution, and they've always rejected it. And to be honest, a two-state solution is a very dangerous prospect for us, because instead of rockets being thrown from Gaza to Tel Aviv, we would have rockets from Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, being thrown to our airports, and that would be the end of our economy. And so, no, at the moment, there's really no desire on our part. Look what happened when we tried to give them a state with Gaza. Not at all. But do we want the autonomy, the self-determination and the autonomy of the Palestinian people? Yes, we do. Thank you so much.
For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.